Assalamu alaikum and good day everyone. In this video, I will cover part 2 of topic 6, which related to system construction, coding and testing. Before starting, I want just to remind you that there are 6 topics related to topic 6. The first, the system implementation, was covered in the previous video 1, and in this video I will cover system construction, coding and testing, while the other 4 topics will be covered in the next videos. So in this video specifically, I will go through system construction and the various types of system testing. System construction and testing activity is considered labor-intensive, which requires a large workforce or a large amount of work in relation to output. In this activity, tools are usually required, such as programming tools or software development tools or software testing tools. Also, in this activity, blueprints are essential, which provide a complete description of the system configuration and how its components fit together. In this activity, mistakes can be deadly. Specifically, mistakes in coding can be deadly, and also the failure to properly design and thoroughly test software before it's used can be deadly. And finally, in this activity, weariness and stress are common. The system construction is defined as the development of all parts of the system, including the software itself, documentation, and new operating procedures. While programming is often seen as the focal point of system development, it's important to remember that programming and testing are tightly coupled. System testing is defined as a process of analyzing software items to detect the differences between existing and required conditions or defects and to evaluate the features of the software item. From another perspective, system testing is an activity in which a system or component is executed under specified conditions. The results are observed or recorded, and evaluation is made of some aspect of the system or component. In this slide, there is a definition of testing provided by the International Software Testing Qualification Board, which stated that the software testing is the process consisting of all life cycle activities, both static and dynamic, concerned with planning, preparation and evaluation of software products and related work products to determine that they are satisfy specified requirement, to demonstrate that they are fit for purpose, and finally to detect defects. It's important to know that test execution is only a part of testing, but not all of the testing activities. Test execution is defined as the process of running test cases or test scenarios. Test activities exist before and after test execution. Specifically, the test activity which exists before the test execution is named test planning, while the test activity which exists after the test execution is the test specification. This slide shows the V model which related to testing the system through the life cycle. I will now list 7 important points related to the V model. Point number 1. The V model is defined as System Development Lifecycle Model or SDLC model, where execution of processes happens in a sequential manner in V shape. Second point, the V model is also known as verification and validation model. Point number 3. The main idea behind the V model is that development and testing tasks are corresponding activities of equal importance. The two branches of the V symbolize this. For example, for the program specification, the corresponding test is unit test, while for the technical specification, the corresponding test is the integration test. Point number 4. The left branch represents the development process. During development, the system is gradually being designed and finally programmed. Point number 5. The right branch represents the integration and testing process. The program elements are successfully being assembled to form larger subsystems, and their functionality is tested. Point number 6. Integration and testing end when the acceptance test of the entire system has been completed. And the last point, point number 7, the V model is issued in many different versions. So sometimes the names and the number even of level vary in literature, but all have the same idea, in which for each development activity it has its own testing. Now I will go through the development activities and will briefly explain each of them. User or business requirement. This is the first step where the needs and requirements of the customers are gathered, specified, and approved. And the output of the user or business requirement will be user requirement document. The second level, system requirement. In this stage, the requirement document, which is the output of user or business requirement, will be used and analyzed in order to generate system requirements, which include all of the requirements at the system level that describe in details the functions which the system as a whole should fulfill to satisfy the stakeholders' need and requirement. The third level is the technical specification, in which, based on system requirements document, the technical specification document is produced. This document has all the required technical details such as hardware, software, programming language to be used in designing the system. Program specification level. In this stage, individual developers or the team use the technical specification to come up with a detailed design of their individual module and its interface with other modules. And finally, coding. In this level, programmers or developers take the program specification and start the coding process. Before defining briefly each kind of the test, it's worth mentioning that for each development activity, the right branch of the V model defines a corresponding test level activity, as I mentioned before. And it's also important to know that testers involved in reviewing documents as soon as drafts are available in the development life cycle. For example, during the user or business requirement phase, testers review the requirement specification, then the user acceptance test plan is the outcome at the end of this phase. For this, you can see by the end of each level, there is a test plan to be generated. Now I will go briefly to define each type of the testing. The first test is the unit test. The unit is the smallest entity which can independently exist, such as a program module. And unit testing verifies that the smallest entity can function correctly when isolated from the rest of the code or units. The next level is the integration test, which checks if group of units or component interact in the same way that is specified by the technical specification. The third level is system test, which verifies whether the system as a whole meets the specified requirement. And finally, the acceptance test will check if the system meets the customer requirement as specified in the contract and or if the system meets user needs and expectation. This slide again shows that there are 4 levels of the test, starting with unit testing, then the higher level integration testing, then the system testing, and finally the acceptance testing. In this slide, it shows that the 4 testing can be categorized into 2 categories. The first category is defect-directed testing, while the second category is conformance-directed testing. The first category includes component or unit testing, integration testing, and system testing, while the second category, which related to conformance-directed testing, it only includes the acceptance testing. And in this slide, there is a definition of each of the testing. For example, for the component or unit testing, it's the testing of individual hardware of software component. The integration testing, which concerns with testing the interfaces and the interaction between the integrated component or system. The third level, system testing, which concerned with testing an integrated system to verify that it meets specified requirement. And finally, the acceptance testing, which will include the user in order to test the requirement and business processes and to ensure that it satisfies the acceptance criteria and to enable the user or customer or other authorized entity to determine whether or not to accept the system. This slide shows the tasks for test level. It shows for each level of the testings what to test, the aim of task to detect. For example, for the component unit, this test is responsible for finding coding problem or problems in detailed design algorithm, while the integration testing is concerned with finding problems in interfaces working together design architecture. The system testings will find problem in requirement or problems with system attributes, and finally the acceptance testing will be responsible in finding problems such as deviation from customer interpretation of requirement and need, or if the system doesn't work on the customer platform and in the customer environment. This slide summarizes the system testing hierarchical view. It shows the hierarchical view of any system, which will start the first level with one coding statement. The second level, after combining one or more statements, will form what is called module or unit, and one or more module will combine to form the program, and one or more program combined to form a system or subsystem. And as mentioned before, each of these levels has its own testing in order to test the system. Finally, this slide summarizes acceptance testing by users, and it shows that the acceptance testings, which related to testing the whole system by the user or by the customer, can be classified into 5 testing. Here it starts with the definition of acceptance testing, which is formal testing with respect to user need, requirement, and business processes, which conducted to determine whether or not a system satisfies the acceptance criteria and to enable the user or customer or other authorized entity to determine whether or not to accept the system. When we say user acceptance testing, it related to conduct the test by the end user, and the testing usually will based on the defined user requirement. The operational acceptance testing is another type of acceptance testing in which the acceptance of the system will done by those who administer the system. The feature which will be covered include testing of backup or restore or disaster recovery. The third type of acceptance testing is regulation acceptance testing, where the testing is performed against any regulation which must be adhered to, such as governmental, legal, or safety regulation. The fourth and the fifth acceptance testing is called alpha testing and beta testing. Both are same in terms of the testing will be done by the customer or user, but the difference, the location where to conduct the testing. In alpha testing, the test will be performed at developer site, while the beta testing, the testing will be conducted at the customer side. But again, both of them the testing will be conducted by the end user, but the location is the different. So this is the end of part 2 of topic 6. Thank you very much for listening.